To all of our viewers on Facebook, welcome to the virtual mayoral candidate discussion. My name is Brittae Gray Ross. I am the Director of Educational Activities for the Epsilon Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Just real quick, those who are looking to register to vote, the last day to register to vote is February 3rd. The last day to request an absentee ballot is February 17th. This is a virtual discussion, so it's not just an interview between myself and Alderman Reed, but also with you all who are viewing. So if you have any questions, just put the questions in the comment and I'll try to get to the questions as we go further on into the discussion. Welcome again, and thank you to our guest, President of the Board of Aldermen, Louis Reed. Thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to your chapter and other folks that'll be listening tonight. So I'm looking forward to an engaging discussion about some of the issues. And I really like your format because you actually have time to drill into and to get into an issue. Our issues and things in front of the city are a lot longer than 36. They're a lot more complex than what you can do or explain in 30 or 60 seconds. So.
Yeah. I mean, this cuts down on a lot of the rebuttals and things of that nature, and we can kind of get more into, your key points and things you want to touch on as a candidate. So again, I appreciate you, and just so it can be said, you have been very, very accommodating. So,
thank you. So,
thank you very much. But anyway, going into our conversation, for the viewers who may not know much about you, could you tell us a little bit about your background and why you got into politics?
Well, I think it's best to kind of go back to my upbringing and everything. First, let me just say thank you to Epsilon, Lambda, Alpha, Phi Alpha for hosting me tonight and for getting information out to people so that they can make an informed decision. Brother, I grew up one of 9 kids. My mother was a cook and my father was a mechanic, right? But we weren't politically connected at all whatsoever. But one of the things that my parents taught us was to use our voices and to stand for things that were right and just. Sometimes growing up, growing up with 9 kids in the household, you can see the struggles, right? So I watched why my parents struggled to pay rent and utilities. But amidst all those struggles, sometimes, our home didn't have, electric to light our home or gas to heat it. My mama was always held us close and told us that those days were going to be over, right? She taught us to respect the opinions of others and own our failures even more so than our successes. It's that kind of upbringing that led me into public service once I've gotten older, right? My background is mathematics, computer science. I had a very successful computer consulting business with my brother prior to jumping full steam into politics and leaving that life behind, right? I'm a father of 4, right? And I try to instill some of those things that was instilled in me as a child in my kids, right? And I think about the job I do now as president of the Board of Aldermen. And, I often draw on the lessons that were instilled in me as a child, right? Which led me to pass legislation and introduce programs and services that have had a major impact on families all across the city. Some of them like, creation of thousands of jobs, expanding youth programs and services, full accreditation of our St. Louis City public schools, removal of illegal guns off our streets, greatly expanding senior services, increased small business resources, and adoption of a local and a regional sustainability plan, reinvesting in our neighborhoods, passing into law for the first time in the history of the city of St. Louis a mandatory minority inclusion, minority and women-owned business inclusion plan. So it's no longer an executive order, it's an actual law in the city of St. Louis. It's a major accomplishment, and millions of dollars of COVID relief funding, right? But that's just, you know, that little list that I just listed does no way represent my full body of work. But it's a forum like this where I get to talk in a lot more detail about some of these things, like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right? I was one of the architects of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, one of a handful of aldermen that put that together and got it passed, that provides millions of dollars of relief for families on an annual basis, right? So if you need rental assistance, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, all of those things come from this Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we structured years ago, right? So it's many things like that that I've had the blessing to be involved in, right? So I'm looking forward to talking with you, and you can see, but you know, but also I'm the first African American ever elected to be the president of the board of aldermen in the history of the city, and you know, I take that seriously because I would not have been able to do that had it not been from everybody who came before me and laid the foundation so that I could, right? So it's my job to lay a foundation for others to come behind me, right? That's why I'm very serious about the work I do. That's why I push the envelope. Civilian oversight bill on the police department, well, we got that done, right? Was not done before I became president of the board, right? And I've had the honor to pass more legislation and sign more legislation into law in St. Louis than anybody in the history of the city, right? But that's because of a lot of people who made that possible for me to occupy this seat as president of the board.
Gotcha. We're definitely going to get deeper into all of it. For my next question, and to give a little context behind it, last mayoral campaign, you got about 18% of the vote. What did you learn during your last mayoral campaign that makes you better prepared to both lead and govern at this time?
Well, it's important. Like I told you when I started, I'm a mathematician, right? So data is really important in terms of looking at that voter data and election data and seeing what it truly means. I know it's a generally held view that if myself or Antonio French or others got out, you know, another candidate, Tashara Jones, would have been able to win. But that's not what the data shows at all. So the splits that were happening in the vote was a split between myself, Lyda Cruson, because of her long established record, right? And myself and Antonio French, right? So myself and Tashara, we weren't really splitting many votes in that election. So what the exit polling showed, and every poll leading up to that election showed, is that if I was out of the race, Lyda Cruson would have won by a landslide, right? Because a bulk of the votes, those South Side, Central Corridor, moderate votes, those would all went to Lyda. They weren't going to Tashara or anybody else, right? So she would have won by a real good margin. It also showed that if Antonio French would have gotten out, I would have won with Tashara and Lyda Cruson in the race, right? That's just the numbers. That's just the facts, right? So what this new election with Prop D, the reason I did not support Prop D, although Proposition D favors a candidate like myself, a person with very broad support in neighborhoods all across the city, whether you're talking, you know, moderate Democrats to very, liberal Democrats or whatever, right? So I have support all across the city, old, young, and in between. But it put an unfair barrier in place for other people who may want to run for office, right? So one of the things that Prop D did was it required 2,000 signatures to be able to get on the ballot, right? We all, for folks that are old enough, they remember Jim Crow because they had to actually live through it, right? Folks that are younger, they at least can read about Jim Crow, some of those things that were barriers that were put in place to keep African Americans largely from engaging in in the electoral process. So when I saw that Prop D, I saw that right away. It doesn't impact me, and the reason why is because I know that with my infrastructure and the things that we've done, collecting 2,000 signatures for a candidate like me that's been around for a long time, that was not going to be a high bar for me to meet. Matter of fact, we got our signatures faster than anybody. We got them in 48 hours. We turned our signatures in, right, in 48 hours and was done with it. But for candidates that want to enter the process, it makes it almost impossible for them. So the 3 candidates that did not make it on the ballot were 3 minorities, right? That did not, 2 of them African-American male and African-American female, did not make it on the ballot. So what does that mean to us? That means that their voices now are not even being heard through this process, right? And I think that takes something away from it, right? So Proposition D changes things somewhat, but
yeah. I mean, you brought up quite a couple few things in your statement. I just got finished with the interview with Treasurer Jones not too long ago, and she mentioned that you all had a session where you were to come together, and for a candidate, and basically it was more so of an ego thing.
Well, no, I wouldn't characterize it that way. And sorry
Okay.
for cutting you off. I wouldn't characterize it that way. Part of what happened now, here's like we have to live in with some realities also. I mean, all of that other stuff that's background. And here's the reality, right? If the person who called the meeting was a person who had already donated $20,000 to Shar Jones, so I didn't have a problem sitting in a room, but I can tell you, but here's the reality, and you can ask anybody that was there. I didn't have a problem sitting in the room. At the time I came in the room, I was leading in the polls and had more money in the bank than any other candidate around the table. So the talk was how everybody else can get out and Tashara can stay in, right? There wasn't any other discussion. So you cannot, look, we have to be grown-ups, we have to be adults about this stuff. You cannot enter in negotiations with anybody and expect to get anywhere coming from that position, right? So, when I saw what the other, look, I understood the numbers sitting at the table. I understood that the last thing any of them could afford was me not being in the race. As I'm not in the race, it ain't a race because Lyda Cruson would have won by a landslide. That's the reality of where all the numbers wasn't even a close race then, right? She was going to have over $1 million and she ended up having $1.1 million, right? I ended up having 380,000, right? So the money was going to be in her campaign. Had I not been in the race, she probably would have had more. And she would have won she absolutely would have won by a bigger margin, right? But it had nothing to do with ego, and everything to do with the setting and with the fact that it was never a true, honest discussion between Treasurer Jones and the other candidates that were in the race.
Okay, well, in the other issue about the signatures, right? So, and splitting the African American vote is a real thing. And had those, other 3 candidates stuck in the race, some people make the argument that it would have further split the vote. You don't think so? Or
well, and I'm also speaking as the candidate that was the first to file for office, right? So I had run against the former mayor Francis Slay when everybody, Tashara Jones, and everybody was scared to do it. As a matter of fact, they were over there helping them, right? So
Mhm.
I was the one that stepped out for the African American community to try to take us to a different place, right?
Right.
And in this last mayor's race, I was the first one to file, first one to say I was going to run, filed, and was in the race, right? Raising money, doing everything I needed to do in the race. And then Tashar and these guys all came in as an afterthought, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, that's just the reality, right? That's real and it's reality. I know it seems kind of just straightforward, but that's just what it is, right? So, you know, but when we look at, you know, how we move forward, right? The first thing that should have happened in that race, given the populations you have to carry to beat a white candidate in a heads-up race, right? I was the first person to come along that was able to successfully do that, right? And Tashar's race for treasurer, she won in a very crowded primary, right, with 2 or 3 other white candidates, and she was able to get through that with them splitting the vote, right?
Mhm.
The only one up until that point that had a history of being able to run the kind of race that needed to be run and win a mayoral race like that was me. In the race against former Mayor Francis Slay, he had $1.75 million. We had 280,000, and we almost won the race with 280,000, 1.75 million dollars on his side, right?
Mhm.
So that's the strength and everything that was brought that I was bringing with me, right? Um, this race with Prop D being the way it is, it does not matter because you can vote for whoever you want to in the primary, right?
Mhm.
And then the real race is going to be in the general election, right? In a
Mhm.
heads up race. I know my ability to win in a heads up race in the city of St. Louis against any candidate, right? So I'm looking forward to that. You know, those odds favor us better. Anytime we can get in a heads up race, that's a good thing for me and my camp.
Got you, got you. So for my next question, how does your experience as president of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen give you the ability to hit the ground running as mayor?
Well, that is the one of the most important things that we're faced with here. The running the office of mayor of the city of St. Louis is not a ceremonial role, right? It's one that requires some know-how and some experience if you're going to be able to do it and do it successfully, right? As the president of the board, you're the second highest ranked elected official in the city, right behind the mayor. So it's the mayor, then the president of the board of aldermen. So and matter of fact, when the mayor is out of town, you're supposed to be the mayor of the city of St. Louis, although nobody has ever come over and said, you're the mayor today, right? It doesn't work that way. But, but, um, but the big decisions that have had to be made in the city, like when we had the 2008 market downturn, right? When everything was upside down, people were losing their homes left and right and things like that. I helped to guide the city through that market downturn, right? Dealing with issues of public safety, issues of everything from the tap water that comes out of your tap when you turn on your water fountain faucet in the house, right? All of
Mhm.
those decisions are decisions that fall under the purview of the mayor of the city of St. Louis. And there is no one in this race today that's more prepared to hit the ground running day one and run this city than myself. And, you know, I'm just saying, again, this role, and also the other important thing to note here is the mayor of the city of St. Louis, I said it wasn't a ceremonial role, but I didn't really dig down into that much. So
Mhm.
based on our charter, right, of the city of St. Louis, and the powers that are vested in the mayor's office and what the mayor has to go through to exercise those powers, you have to be able to build coalitions. You have to be able to wield some strength and some power at the board of aldermen, and all these factors have to go together for you to be able to truly lead. Otherwise, it's impossible for you to lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having been at the board of Aldermen and leading the board for all the years that I've led the board, I now have a solid coalition that gives me the power to pass those things that can help transform this city, right? Those relationships, if you go into the mayor's office with deep problems with of this legislative branch, you're not going to get anything done. It's like impossible, right? It doesn't work that way. So we need to make some progress in our city. If you look at issues of public safety, I've been out front leading on those from day one. When you turn on your TV, you see me talking about those and working to get things done on those. You don't see anybody else doing that stuff. When our school system, working to get them the full accreditation of our school system. They're not under the city's control, but I didn't see any of those other, nobody else involved in this mayor's race working to get that done, right? Putting programs in place so that there's mediation that has to happen before a family loses their home. That would be me, right? I ain't seen any. So I mean, there's so many aspects of this thing but from the president of the board, you don't run the city. You're the head of the legislative branch. You have 4 employees. The mayor's office, you have thousands of people. You have everything from a full legal team. You have more security guards in the mayor's office than you have employees in the president board. Every single city department works for you. You then have a chance to transform some things, which is why I'm working to become the mayor of the city of St. Louis. There are families that are hurting in our city. One whole part of our city is just been totally destroyed by failed policies, redlining, Mayor Shamo's Team 4 plan. And, when you look at it, think about this. If you owned a home in North St. Louis, right, when they were actively redlining and to prevent any kind of economic prosperity from happening in North St. Louis. And former Mayor Vincent Shamo put his Team 4 plan in place that said not $1 will be invested in North St. Louis. Now think about that. What's the biggest investment any family has? Their home.
Yeah.
So now the value of that home, the bottom dropped out of the value of those homes because of policies that were unfair to African Americans, right? So now generationally, that has hurt families through generations now because those mortgages were upside down, all kinds of things, right? And those families were saddled with all of that debt and everything else, right? They thought they were going to have something to pass on, and they had nothing to pass on because an intentional policy that took it out of their hands. So it's that kind of thing we need to rectify.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get more into that, as we continue to go on with the questions. I want to jump to something else real quick. What is your track record of working to reduce crime in the city and taking illegal guns off the streets?
Well, I'm the only candidate in this race that has done anything remotely related to that, including the Children's Savings Fund that the treasurer has. I'm the guy that got that moved through the Board of Aldermen because the members of the Board of Aldermen stuck it in committee because they didn't like the program and they didn't believe in it. So the treasurer called me and asked me if I would help to get it on track because it was a dead thing. It was never going to happen. So I got votes lined up, moved it, got a good sponsor for the bill, got it through, and then got it passed on the floor of the board. And I'm glad I did. It was an important project for her. Cure Violence, it took me 6 years to bring Cure Violence to the city of St. Louis. Cure Violence advocates getting out in front of the crime issue, right? Opposed to just an arrest and incarceration model, right? So what it talks about is the fact that people get into crime based on their environments that they're growing up in, right? And the behaviors that they learn as children, right, that are enforced all the way up until adulthood. Well, the cure violence model uses ex-offenders. They take ex-offenders and train them with, train them with everything that they need to be the agents of change, so that then they go back into the community with some credibility and ability to reach some of the people that are going down the wrong road, right? And getting them the resources that they need to change their lives, right? So I brought Cure Violence to the city of St. Louis. I've also, brought body cameras to the city of St. Louis. It took me numerous years to get that passed through the board of ENA, so that we now have body cameras. Work to create thousands of jobs all across the city of St. Louis, and work to get people into those jobs so that then they can go on and have careers, right? And also work to get kids out of the gangs, right? I'm talking about me personally. I'm not saying send somebody to do it. I'm saying go grab them with my hands, sit down and talk with them and work with them and show them that there's a better way, right? So all of those things and more. Yeah. Sorry, we can go into all of those things and more I've been involved in. So
yeah, I mean, we got a lot of questions, and I'm trying to.
I know.
It's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to manage it.
Go ahead.
But real quick. Okay, so last year, the Ethical Society of Police stated that there were white supremacists in the St. Louis Police Department. How do you plan to address the issue of white supremacists in St. Louis Police Department?
Look, here's the thing. Some of that truly wasn't hidden, right? Because there was a blog that they would go out. There was a blog where some of them would go out and post on, right? So it should not have been a high bar for the executive branch to say, hey, is this officer, and this officer, right? I think it is one of those things that if left unattended, we will never see a unification and a healing begin, right? Because it affects the credibility of the department as a whole, right? So there is no room for any white supremacists, not just in the police department, anywhere within our system of government. I mean, you think about just delivery of basic services, everything from street cleaning on, right? If you have people within those jobs doing it based on race and doing it and delivering those services unfairly, it's going to impact us all. But certainly in law enforcement, there is absolutely no way that should be tolerated within law enforcement.
Gotcha. I got another question. This is from Anthony McNary. Do you believe St. Louis City needs a new police chief, a new public safety director, and a new police union chief?
Well, first off, the police union, we don't have any direct control over that. That's a membership thing, right? So their members vote them in and out. When you see membership change, you'll see leadership change within that. But looking at the police chief and the public safety director, I would like to spend more time with the police chief and public safety director and not judge them based on any performance up until this point. Because one of the things that people may not see and may not understand is what else was happening in the background. What kind of resources did they have available to them? What kind of direction were they, stuck with having to carry out all of those things, right? I know that Judge Jimmy Edwards is just an incredibly capable guy. He's, the school he started that gives kids a second chance so that they have an opportunity to continue school and finish their school and then move on is just amazing. I think Judge Jimmy Edwards has done a lot of things that the average person has not seen and don't understand. With this cancel culture that's going on, there's people that love to get out online and just love to play in that whole cancel culture world. I'm not one that responds to that world at all, right? Because I think that if you are going to lead, you have to be able to lead without regard to some of those things. Just like, anyway, I know, I don't know. Well, let's move on. Let's move on, because if we keep talking about that, we're getting nothing else done.
I wanted to also say, Brother Jones, I'm definitely going to get to your question, but I want to ask Mr. Reed another question. How will you protect officers like Heather Slater who speak out against the racism in St. Louis Police Department?
By I passed an ordinance, a use of force ordinance in the city of St. Louis just this last year during all the protests and everything. And part of what we put in that use of force ordinance is now officers have an obligation to inform their higher ups about things that are going on within the department and other things that officers are not doing, or things that they're engaging in. If it's illegal acts or if it's inappropriate acts, they now have an obligation to do it. Otherwise, they are facing grounds for termination and all sorts of things by not acting on it, right? I think it's just absolutely outrageous that any officer or anybody, period, forget about the fact that you're a police officer. Imagine if you're another city employee and you know that an officer, you see an officer engaging in some racist acts, you should inform them, right? And there should be absolutely no punitive actions taken against you, right? Because you've done a good thing. You've done a good thing, because this city isn't going to be able to move forward with on the backs of racism.
Gotcha. I got a question from Daryl Jones. Do you have a relationship with the Biden administration where funds and or economic opportunity could be part of the St. Louis landscape?
Absolutely, 100%. If you think about it, I was only one of two citywide elected officials that was on the stage when Biden came to St. Louis to introduce him, to bring him up, right? That's not the first time I've met with him numerous other times. But absolutely, I have a very strong relationship with that entire administration, right? I'm part of an organization. Well, I helped start a national group of board chairmen across the country, heads of the board of aldermen or city councils, right? The council leaderships from the largest cities across America. And we've kept in close contact, and we have a very strong network that we use across the country for various different things, right? So absolutely, I have strong relationships, not just with the Biden administration, but all through the halls of Congress and the Senate. Nancy Pelosi, when she came to town, I was one of the handful of people that were with her when she was in town, right? So yeah.
I got another question from Miller Boyd. Are you saying that you are responsible for overseeing public safety, but not for the increased number of murders in the city? Where does the buck stop?
Well, the buck stops in the mayor's chair. There is exactly one person that's in charge of public safety, and that's the mayor. Remember, I said I'm the head of the legislative branch of city government. So I can move things, I can pass ordinances, right? But I have no power of implementation, right? So you look at cure violence, even though we were able to pass the ordinance and put the funding and everything in place, it's still up to the executive branch to implement it. And it took them a year to implement it, right? So absolutely, I don't have control over the mayor's office. There's this fallacy out there, and I've heard it from, a handful of people, And it's kind of funny. They say, well, as president of the board, you're more powerful than the mayor, right? Like, in what world? In what world is the president of the board more, the head of the legislative branch, more powerful than? It's like saying that, Congress woman Cori Bush is more powerful than Biden. Then it's a whole different ballgame, right? She has some power, like I have some power, but she's not president and I'm not the mayor. That's why I'm running to become the mayor.
So real quick, I'm gonna bounce through different stuff.
Oh no, go ahead.
But according to St. Louis Today, we are on a decline as far as the number of cases of COVID-19. We've been, like the whole nation, especially, I see.
I can't hear you. You went out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Like I was saying, this pandemic has affected our nation and, our region. And according to St. Louis Today, it looks like we are on the decline as far as the number of hospitalizations and new cases. So how would you work to continue the decline of the coronavirus infection rate and hospitalizations?
Well, I think part of it is information, right? The African American community suffered very gravely at the beginning of this because of lack of information and lack of resources getting out to the community, right? Everybody was saying, you got to get a mask, you got to wear a mask, you got to stay 6 feet apart from all that and all stuff, right? Well, that's not so easy for some families, right? They're struggling just to meet these basic expenses. Now you say that they have to go buy this very expensive, hand sanitizer and all this other stuff. It took a minute for the African American community to get there. Thank people like Nate Dixon that did that Mask Up St. Louis campaign to really, really inform a lot of our young people that you are not invincible and you needed to wear a mask and follow these procedures too, because you may not die, but you can carry it home and one of your parents or grandparents can pass away. So I say that because if we want to stay on the decline, we're going to have to continue to assure that people have the information they need. This past summer, I spent many, many weekends out with Senator Steve Roberts Jr. Giving free testing so that we can ensure that the African American community had easy access to testing, right? So we need to continue the testing. We need to assure that the vaccines, when they become available and we're getting them into the community, like they had some with the seniors today, right? That we take away the mobility issues so that the people who need the vaccine don't have to worry about, well, I have to get downtown or to BJC or to SSM to get the shot, right? We need to assure that it's down within the community, and that's going to take us working with nonprofit partners and the like to get that done, and to assure that people have the information on how they can get on the list, what vaccines are available, what are some of the symptoms they need to look for, right? In the interim, right? And how do they get tested, right? And when should they be tested, right? So all of those things, and where they can get free masks and gloves and all these things from.
Gotcha. And for my next question, the city and county have slightly different orders. Why does the city have different COVID restrictions than the county, and what can be done to better assist small businesses during the pandemic?
Here's the thing. I don't know if you heard me on when COVID was way on the front end, when COVID was just now starting to be a thing in this, anywhere in the country, right? So I came out and made a call, and I said that I think that St. Louis County and St. Louis City needs to partner on their COVID response and what they're doing and how they're implementing it. Why? Because we're feeding off of the same hospital network, right? So it doesn't matter if St. Louis City does better, if St. Louis County isn't on the same page, right? no pun intended, if they're not on the same page, no pun intended, you know, they're going to put a higher burden on the hospital network, right? Or we are, right? So we're feeding off of the same, you know, healthcare network, right? So it's so important that we coordinate services. You know, the first allotment of funds, right? St. Louis County got, you know, 170 some odd $1 million. St. Louis City got like 30 some odd $1 million, whatever. It was a mass difference in the allotment of funds that St. Louis County got versus St. Louis City. So we couldn't even afford to fund all the contract tracers that we should have been able to fund. So I asked Sam Page, I said, I think you should share some of your money, because if we can't keep people safe in our city, it doesn't matter if you're doing a good job out there or not. So coordination has to happen across borders.
I got a quick question from Jamel Harris. Mr. Reed has been Board of Aldermen president since 2013. Since that time, the city has been going downhill in multiple areas. What will he do differently as mayor from what he is doing as Board of Aldermen president to make it better?
Well, I think number one, I'm glad he asked that question, because as president of the Board of Aldermen, you do not run the city. You don't run the city. You have 4 employees and that's it, right? That's his question is why I'm running for mayor. I'm running for mayor because the city has seen a steady decline in population. I'm running for mayor because the city has seen these record numbers of kids shot and killed on our streets, right? I'm running for mayor because when the unemployment rate for the average person in the city of St. Louis is 5%, the unemployment rate amongst young African-American males hovers around 22%, right? And that's not right. And then the people turn around and say, well, why don't they just do better? Well, you know, that's an easy thing to say from certain seats when you're not living it, right? So I'm running for mayor so that every family in this city has equity, they have some equality, and they have someone that's going to fight for them in City Hall to transform our city. Nobody in the city is going to do better until the people that have the least, the people that have been cut out, the people that have been just left behind, until somebody reaches a hand out and assures that they have some equality and they have the things that they need to transform their lives and to stabilize their families. So that's why I'm running for mayor. And under my leadership, those things will change, because the buck will solidly land on my desk. I will gladly take on that responsibility, because as mayor, it is your responsibility.
Yeah, Brother Harris was trying to emphasize that what would you do differently, not just as mayor, but differently.
Well, I listed it. I said, there has to be a heavier focus on the people who have been cut out, left behind, and everything else. There has to be a focus on, if we want, look, Nancy Reagan said to people, just say no to drugs, right? The reason it didn't work is because you didn't give the people anything to say yes to. So if we're telling these young kids, hey, just leave the life of crime behind, just put down the guns, just do better, we have to give them something to say yes to. And there has to be a renewed interest and a total shift of the methodology and the way the city assesses those resources. And when we do that, everybody wins, right? And a lot of these young people that people have written out and said, well, they're never going to amount to nothing. Guess what? They're going to amount to something, and they're going to grow. They're going to come out and they're going to grow. And some of them are going to out-achieve some of the people who looked at them and said they're not going to amount to nothing, right? I could tell you that from firsthand experience.
Another question for you. Some would say North St. Louis has been neglected for years.
Yes.
The National Geospatial Administration is in the process of building a multi-billion dollar facility in North St. Louis, but there are many areas and wards of North St. Louis that continue to be neglected. What do you say to the constituents in those areas that remain underserved, and how do you plan to address the Delmar divide?
Well, first thing is the Delmar divide wasn't just something that fell out of space and just happened to happen, right? It was very deliberate. It is the outgrowth of failed, policies that were put in place because one whole side of the city was disregarded, right? To understand how to change it is really important to understand its history, right? Former Mayor Vincent Shamo put in place a plan called the Team 4 plan. And the Team 4 plan said that we shall not invest $1 in North St. Louis because we're going to allow it to come down all the way down, and then we can go in there and mow it down and rebuild and build this beautiful place. Guess what? Families live there. So like I told you when we first started talking, that hurt families generationally when you did that. That hurt the schools, that hurt everything that was on that whole side of the city, right? And it's unconscionable that that was an actual plan, right? So part of what we need to do to address the issues in Delmar Divide, we are going to have to, it's going to take resources. The same development tools that it took to rebuild Central West End, rebuild downtown, rebuild the South Side, those exact same tools need to be used as liberally north of Delmar as they've been used in other parts of the town, right? And the other thing that is really, really important for people to do here. I know a lot of people look at the aldermen and say, well, it's because those aldermen, they haven't done anything. Let me tell you something, those aldermen don't have the power to do what you're talking about, right? They just don't, right? It's not, the city has not vested all that power in the members of the Board of Aldermen, right? So when you look at your local alderman and you look at the conditions around you, right? Don't blame them for that, because I'm down there. I hear how they fight for you, right? So nobody can tell me this. I know firsthand how they fight for you. And I also know firsthand how some of the people who profess to fight for you are not fighting for you. Now I know that's a dose of cold reality, but that's reality, right? And it's important for people to understand that if they ever want to get past where we are now, right? Because where we are now is everybody in the area fighting against each other, blaming each other, and the blame doesn't belong to anybody in that area. They're all, every last one of them have been victimized, including that alderman. That's the reality.
Going back to COVID, so about the restrictions. A lot of businesses are being forced to.
I can't.
Can you hear me? Can you
yeah,
hear
I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm sorry. A lot of businesses are being forced to shut down because of COVID. What do you think about the restrictions, the current restrictions on small businesses and how it's affecting the small businesses?
I fought to get more money put in place for small businesses. The current bill that I'm carrying through the Board of Aldermen has $88 million to bring assistance to nonprofits and small businesses and families all across the city. And I was just talking to somebody today about this because they were like, well, why are you guys focusing on small business and families? Why don't you just focus on just families? Well, to focus on small businesses is also to focus on families, because the families are the people who work at the small business. So if the small business goes under, the families who worked at those small businesses also go under. So it's just absolutely vitally important that we provide those critical resources to these small businesses so that they can make it through this market downturn. It's by no fault of theirs at all whatsoever that they've had to close their doors, right? It was directed by the government, the state and federal government, and local municipalities to say, these are the rules that you're gonna have to follow, if you operate within our borders, right? And the families who work there are suffering. So we need to have funds on both sides. I will be working with the Biden administration and also the state to assure that this next round of funding that Nancy Pelosi and these folks are working on, that we can assure that we get a lion's share, our share, back to the taxpayers of the city of St. Louis.
Yeah, I, it seems that most of the concerns coming from, some of the small businesses, especially the restaurants, isn't necessarily the funding, but the actual restrictions that is preventing them from being able to open up. We've had recent stories come out in the city about the actual restrictions and government being too uh, overpowering, having too much power over the say so of
Oh, I see.
business owners.
Yeah, here's the thing. I get that, I understand that, and I also understand the fact that a one size fits all policy is something that is that really truly does not work, in reality, right? But you have to get it as close as possible. When we look at, gun violence in the city, right, and we want stricter gun laws. Well, in the state of Missouri, they say we don't need any gun laws because we want our guns to go hunting, right? Well, in the city of St. Louis, that one size fits all policy doesn't work for us in the city. Same thing with the businesses, right? With these businesses, right? Depending on this the type of business, right, and their work hours, their clientele, and all these things may, this one size fits all model may not be working the best for them, right? So as the next mayor of the city of St. Louis, that's part of what I will look into deeply also, because I understand that if we hurt a small business, we hurt a family. And losing jobs in the city of St. Louis only adds to our crime rate and everything else.
So, next question. There was a report in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, January of 2019. They claimed tax abatement cost St. Louis schools $31 million in uncollected revenue. Do you support tax abatements at the ultimate cost to the children of the city of St. Louis? And is this the reason why we are seeing public school closings?
Uh, Number one, it's an unpopular position that I'm about to tell you, but it's a factual position. Tax abatements aren't the reason why we're losing kids in the St. Louis City public schools. Here's our reality. And between 1950s and 1960s, we had 110,000 kids in our school system. So our school system, the one that we have right now, it was built to handle 110,000 kids. We now have 19,000 kids in our school, right? But when we had 110,000 kids in our school, we had a population in the city of St. Louis of 856,000. So we had a population of 856,000, 110,000 kids in the school system. Then Brown versus the Board of Education came, forcing the schools to desegregate, right? And what happened? People flew out of the city left and right. So we saw a drop of over 400,000 people almost instantly across those next two censuses out of the city of St. Louis. Now we're sitting here in the city with slightly under 300,000 people in the city, right? So as population continues to drop, we're seeing lower and lower enrollments in our schools. This year, the school system, right now, as we sit here, they have a $104 million budget surplus. Let me say that again. As we sit here right now, they have $104 million budget surplus. They have a 36% emergency reserve fund, right? That is that is as financially healthy as you can get. $104 million surplus and a 36% emergency reserve fund. So why do they continue to lose students? Charter schools have been siphoning off students. Our population declines, and our population decline continues to, move students out further and further to county schools, because why? People are leaving the city of St. Louis. So if we continue to lose population in the city because of because of all of the shootings in the city of St. Louis, and only closing 10 to 30% of the murder cases, which means 70% of the people are still walking the streets of the city of St. Louis that shot somebody and murdered them, right? That's a problem. So it's a lot more complex. That the issue of tax abatement, it's an easy one for people to pick and say, oh, it's because of these tax abatements. But I have to live in the reality. The reality is that that if indeed you had no tax abatements, the schools would still be in decline. They'd have more money in the bank and more money in the emergency reserve, because it's not a money issue. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a $104 million budget surplus. Now, I will tell you, St. Louis public school system is a good school system. The average person thinks that because some of the schools have challenges, they're performing under the state testing on reading and mathematics, right? And the reason some of that's happening is because of what's happening in the household, right? So it's also the product, the kids, when they're coming to school, right? Half of these kids have had family members shot and killed. They've had friends shot and killed. You go in any one of these classrooms and say, raise your hand if you know somebody's been shot. Raise your hand if you're one of your family members. By the time you finish, every kid in that classroom's hand is raised. That is having an impact on those kids, right? Not having a balanced meal, food deserts, having an impact on those kids, right? So let's not lay the entire blame at the feet of the St. Louis public schools. There's other factors that come into play there, right? And they found out through the Harlem Children's Zone that if you have wraparound services and treat the family, the kid comes to school and learning can take root in that child. So we can see all of those things. We'll be able to see all of those test scores and everything flip from left to right. The schools I have to give it to them. They are doing they are doing everything in their powers to educate these kids. We have some great teachers and everything else, right? Do we have challenges in our school system? Absolutely, we do, like every school system in America, right? But let's focus on the right things, because let's not work on something over here because it's cool, sexy, and it sounds like a cool thing to do. And at the end of the day, end up exactly where we are today, right? I've been at this too long, and I'm not. I want to see some results, so we're going to push for some results.
Gotcha. I'll have don't have a lot of time left, so I'm gonna try to get in what I can, you guys. So this next question is from Brother Derek.
I got to hit one more thing before we leave that, though. When we talk about those tax abatements and stuff, earlier on, I said the same things, the same tools that were used to build Central Corridor on South Side is going to have to be used to build North Side. Right? These tools, whether you're talking tax abatement, TIFs, and things of that nature, those tools will have to be used to rebuild North Side, right? They're using them right now. They built South County Mall. They're using them in Clayton. Every place else in the metropolitan area across the state, they're using them. And it would be a shame if we don't use those same tools to rebuild the place that's been left behind.
Gotcha. So this is coming from Brother Derek Perkins. If you become mayor, in what ways might you and the city work with St. Louis public schools to address low enrollment, school closings, etc.? Are you willing to work with the state to secure a moratorium on charter schools being established within the city? Lastly, how might you and the city work with faith communities to provide safe educational and enrichment programs for children and youth intentionally throughout the city?
He already answered all of them. I don't know who was that. Who was that asked that question?
Our brother Derek Perkins, he has.
Derek Perkins, I don't know. Derek may be out there attacking me, all I know, but I can tell you one thing. Derek, based on the structure of that question, Derek knows education. He listed some very key things there: early childhood education, and securing funding for those things. All those things need to happen, right? To be able to stop this. One of the things that all of us need to do to be able to stop the steady decline, like you said, a moratorium on charter schools, that would help, right? Because that's one of the groups that's siphoning off students off of the St. Louis public schools, right? More so than tax abatement and some of these other things, right? But also it's important that we hold up our school system too, right? If all of us, if all we do is talk bad about our system and say how it's no good, it's under, it's a poor system, who's going to send their kid there, right? The mayor of the city absolutely has to be the biggest cheerleader for our schools, because if the mayor doesn't believe, if the mayor, the leader of the city, does not believe in the school system, you tell me why you or anybody else should believe in it, because that's your trusted source. So your mayor has to lead from a position of power, and your mayor has to say, this is a quality, you can get a quality education in a public school system in the city of St. Louis, right? That begins to change the way people view it, right? Because we have to address the perception that all of our schools are bad, right? Peabody School, Mrs. Reed, when she was down at Peabody School, they had some of the, before she started, they had some of the lowest test scores anywhere in the state. You know what she did to turn it around? She stood at the front door, met every kid as they were coming in, and knew their name. And then the ones that didn't show up, she walked across the street, knocked on their front door and said, they need to come to school. And then when a child did something to be expelled, oh, you didn't get expelled. You know what you had to do? You had to show up Saturday school with your parents. It transformed the school almost overnight. Their test scores excelled, right? People have to believe, you have to have some trust and faith. We have some great administrators that work in our school system. We have to back them up and tell their stories, right? And we should not lay every problem in this community at their doorstep and say, guess what? You weren't able to educate our kids when we send them in there broken, right? So we have a moral and ethical responsibility also, all of us as a community, but certainly the mayor does.
All right, Alderman Reed, thank you for your time. Everyone, I tried to get it to as many as I could. You guys are really chopping it up in the comments section. I did what I can. I would like to thank you, Louis Reed, for your time. It's greatly appreciated. To everyone who's looking to view the replay of the discussion that we had here today, it'll be available on our chapter's YouTube channel. So if you go to Elam 1919 Media, you'll be able to see this replay of the discussion that we had today. Again, Louis, thank you for your time, and have a good one, sir.
All right, thank you. It makes me feel good to see a young brother like yourself involved in changing our not just our city, but our nation. Keep doing it, man. You ever need anything from me, reach out, man. See you, brother.
Will do. See you.
All right, bye.